So last Wednesday, I posted my discussion with the audio and video curation team at Motion Array on my YouTube channel, and there was a lot of useful information there for anyone who's interested in applying, and even some great advice for those who are already in the library. There was one small aspect of that discussion which I thought was particularly interesting, and it's something that we didn't get into all that much, but I'd like to explore it a bit more on today's episode. One of the questions I asked them, of course, was what they were looking for in an ideal applicant, and one of the first things they mentioned was organic content, so tracks that aren't entirely in the box, as they say. In other words, real instruments and vocals, for example. I thought that this response was very revealing and on point with today's licensing trends, which I think are moving away from the the dinky, lifeless, this took 20 minutes to put together kind of sound, and has really evolved towards a denser, more sophisticated and intricate production quality, which often features human performances. This isn't just the case for Motion Array and Artlist. As we move into the age of AI and it becomes easier and easier to make music, we have to ask ourselves, what value are we bringing to the table? What are we doing to set ourselves apart from all the other composers who are using the same tools, the same virtual instruments, and the same samples? So welcome to this episode of the Make Music Income podcast. This is episode 55. And today we're just going to be exploring this idea a bit further. But before we do, as always, hello, Eric. How are you? And how's your week been?
Welcome to episode 55 of the Make Music Income podcast. Did you already say that?
I did. I think I said it.
I don't know. I don't know if in your Eric Copeland opening you did.
I tried to do a very Eric Copeland style opening there. Let me know how it was.
I am doing great, man. Just working on a lot of things. Our masterminds are going along very well and a lot of fun because it's in one sense it's kind of like what we do here on the podcast, except it's private, and so we can really delve into a lot of things we can't necessarily say publicly. Just like you and I have private conversations, wouldn't you like to know out there, audience? What we need Steve talk about offline. But it's been good. A lot of stuff going on besides just work and client work, but also in library world. I have the library that I work with is doing a lot of briefs now, and so I sent a dramedy track into a brief, and I'm getting ready to send another kind of track into another one of their briefs. And unlike other places that offer briefs and then you have to pay for play or whatever, this is going directly to the library owner. So you're getting, it's a brief to my library, like directly. He says, "This is what I need," and you send it to him. He says, "Thanks, I'll take it." And there's nothing in between. So that works really cool. And then I just finished an album for a brand new library that is going to be my first album on this library, and pretty good deal, like a 3-year deal, so maybe it's a 5-year deal, but it's not a perpetuity deal.
Okay.
Even though it's a standard 50-50 kind of deal, but not perpetuity. So that's kind of cool. So the possibility of getting tracks back if they're not used is always an interesting thing, I think, in contracts. But I'm delivering this full percussion album soon, and just getting it done and signing the contracts and getting all my information set with the library and all that kind of stuff, beginning stuff with them. So that's pretty cool. And then I have a really interesting thing that's developing from a Motion Array download.
Oh, yeah.
A documentary that somebody is doing using one of my songs, and they contacted me because they were concerned because there was PRO information on the Motion Array listing. Mm-hmm. And so they said, I want to make sure I don't run into any things because it's a nonprofit type of documentary that we're doing, but we're using this one song of yours, and it's pretty cool. It has a lot of emotional meaning for me because I wrote it for my mom and her wedding. And so as it turns out, I said, sure, just go ahead and use it. Just show me I'd love to see the documentary when you get done with it. And he said, hey, you know what? I'm actually in Orlando. And so why don't we meet up and get lunch? So we're going to have lunch tomorrow. And
cool.
He's going to show me some of the early documentary footage. So kind of neat little Motion Array story. We since this is the Make Music Income podcast, we like to talk about income, but there's so many other things around the income that are cool. that are part of this. I was also just looking at my Identify the other night, and I realized, one of the great things about Identify is to be able to see your videos, like you talked about in your Motion Array video, and how they're being used. And I
Yeah.
thought, man, it's instant portfolio. It's like you could take those links and use them on your site to show people what other people are using your music for, and
Yeah.
boom. And we're going to talk about that today. But I realized that maybe the power of Identify is not how much it pays me, but in what it shows me that is being done with my music. And so maybe whether you make income, a lot of income or a little income with it, with all any of these things, there's other things that can happen
Yeah.
with your songs. But I thought that was pretty cool. And then, so now that all these things are kind of done, these like albums, I to turn my country album in. I'm getting ready to turn in this percussion one, and then I'm open now. I can really start to concentrate on new albums, which is always fun, and choose what next I'm going to work on. And probably won't do a full album right away. It seems like libraries are liking me to send them a handful of songs in a genre and say, hey, are you interested in this? Which is faster too.
Like
And
by
then
a handful, you mean like 3 to 5 kind of thing?
3 to 5 and
Yeah.
say, so they see you have the ability to do 3 to 5 of that style, and they go, "Ooh, yes, we would have a use for this. Go ahead
Yeah.
and create the full 10." So that's probably a good way to go. And I've heard people talk about that. Clint talks about that before, about sending only 5. I know Jesse recommends 10 because he says, hey, when they see it, they know there's 10 songs and they're ready to go, and it's fast. Well, it might be, but this is a way I think to get started a little quicker on an album idea,
Yeah.
and then find out if the library needs it before you work on 10 songs and then can't find anybody to take it, which I've had happen before, where I've done 10 great songs I thought were awesome, but no library bid on the entire 10-song album. I end up, putting a song over here and a song over here and a song over here. So
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Artlist is the same way. They only want like 3. Like they prefer smaller submissions just because they say that it's easier for them to market it that way.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
and actually my library is talking about that too. They're looking for a lot of, this is another thing you brought up yesterday, artist submissions that are artists, like actual
Artist.
already artists, and already
Yes.
on Spotify, already have followings of some kind, and then they are doing, and they want EPs. They don't want full albums, just an
Yeah.
EP
Yeah.
of an artist, and that kind of thing is getting popular with libraries now, as you found out in your interview.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what's been your week like?
Well,
What's been
things are good here. I'm finally all set up in the studio. Just in a happy place, working my butt off on music and working on new content pretty much like every day. I'm getting back into my exercise routine, just feeling good and feeling productive. I'm racing to finish 2 Artlist Originals projects by the end of this week, and also have the new trailer music course ready to go, hopefully ready to go by February 1st. That's my target right now. I'm a little overdue on that one, and the members of the Academy have been very patient with me. So thanks, guys, for understanding. It's been chaotic the last few weeks for sure. So speaking of the Academy, the challenge in the Academy for January is to write a product demo for any virtual instrument, basically of your choice, which I think is a great way to promote your work and make connections, by the way. It's something I haven't done enough of, done it a bit, but I decided to write a demo for the Hearth and Hollow library. I'm not sure if you heard of that one.
Hearth and Hollow, it's beautiful.
Yeah, amazing library. It's being sold, like the full version's being sold through Spitfire Audio, but there is a free version on the Piano Book website. Highly recommend going to check that out. And that's where I first heard of it, actually. So I'm actually encouraging the Academy members to write a demo for a Piano Book library because they're such a supportive community. They've already posted the demo that I sent them to their SoundCloud account, which is really, really nice of them. And you can go check that out if you want. It's on the Hearth and Hollow library page on the Piano Book site. The track is called Perpetual Emotion. One of the other Academy members also chose to make a demo for the same library, and they posted his work too. So big shout out to Gary for doing that. It's great, and I'm really excited to hear what everyone else has come up with. So that'll be fun. The live stream showcase for that is on Wednesday, February 1st. Otherwise, I'm gonna try to get back in. I'm hope that I know I keep saying this, but I'm gonna try to get back into the YouTube Shorts game, and with no
Yeah,
real game plan,
not me.
I'm gonna try and film something today and just get try to be creative and have fun. I still believe that in that vertical short content can have a huge impact on growth, whether it's on Instagram or YouTube. We'll have to do another episode on it at some point in the future when I have more to talk about. But I only have one attempted short. I don't think it actually worked out to be a short. Anyway, it's hard enough to make regular videos, as you know. So I don't know. We'll see how much I can get done with that. Watch out for keep an eye out tomorrow for a short. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Lastly, these Spotify continues to climb for me. I'm yet again at an all-time high of about 12,500 monthly listeners, which is cool. And I did a bit of digging into it. For some reason that I don't fully understand, the vast majority of my listeners now all of a sudden are based in India. The top four cities are all Indian cities. So Delhi and Mumbai at the top. And this is awesome, but I'm kind of
Probably
struggling
Arco. Arco's
yeah,
probably spreading
it's
the word.
it's Arco putting in a good word for us. I'm kind of struggling to figure out exactly why this is, but I actually I wonder if it's potentially because Artlist is going hard on promotions in India and looking to kind of tap into that huge market. Because originally I thought it was potentially because of my collab track I did with my friend Mansij, who's also an Artlist contributor, and he lives in Delhi. And our track is doing reasonably well on Artlist. We put it on Artlist, and Spotify's doing okay as well. But I wouldn't say it's doing so well that it would justify this huge influx of monthly listeners from India specifically. And I wasn't added to any playlists, lately either. So it's sort of mysterious, but I'm stoked on it. That's been my week. So it's been a good week.
Good week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, which way are we going to start with this? Let's kind of talk about the topic of the day.
Well, let's talk. I think that you should maybe. I mean, the listeners here have heard you speak about your experience with working with like Nashville performers quite a bit. Like I think you're a great example of a music producer who like works outside of the box, in the sense that you've had a lot of experience hiring performers. A lot of the tracks that you send to your libraries have a lot of organic content in them, like vocals and stuff like that. And I think that this is something that you've just been doing for a long time this way. And I think that you've seen some success with this approach. Like, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Generally, when music is made, and I'm talking any kind of style other than say hip hop, but even hip hop is going to have live vocals in it. But any kind of music that is made for the radio, let's just say, or Spotify in this case, nowadays, it's a lot of times made with people and multiple people. It's not just generated out of a DAW by one person.
Yeah.
There are players. Like for instance, when I was in Nashville and before Nashville, when I did my work before I moved there from Kentucky, I would hire real musicians to play the band parts, and because pop music requires more than just programming. It requires actual players, actual singers, and people want that organic sound. And it's not surprising to me that Motion Array, Artlist, anything like that, or that the libraries that I'm sending stuff to want really high quality stuff played by players. And the reason I moved to Nashville was because of the players and because of the engineers there and the multiple people that I brought in. Here's the word I want to just say, that's the most important word of this podcast probably, is dimensional. There is nothing that creates
Yes.
dimension in a mix like multiple or real playing on tracks, because it takes away this keyboard programming stuff that we can do now. There are masters at that, and when you use stuff like Hearth and Hollow, like you're talking about, that library, it's got such an acoustic sound to it. I mean, just pressing one button can make a world of different sounds happen, and that are triggered and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But even that can get repetitive. Even that can get you have to really work with samples. We were listening to some horns earlier today, and they sound great until they don't for just a second, and then they sound that you could tell it's not real. And I think, um, but there's just something to real drums, real bass player, real guitars. Guitars is the biggie. The guitars is the probably the biggest one,
Totally.
and
Yeah.
then real piano, real organ, real whirly, real instruments that are being played in the studio by a human. There's just no creating that the same by yourself. Even though I can play really convincing drums, really convincing bass parts, really convincing piano and synth and all those kind of things, I can't really, other than like one note guitar libraries from Native Instruments or something, can I simulate guitars? And sometimes it works, but still, if you solo the track, you'll hear a repetition, and it's only as good as it was sampled in.
Yes.
But it's not just that, though. It's the personality of all those people involved and the dimensional aspect that you get. And then you add singer or singers on it, where you have background singers, you have a solo singer, and you add all these dimensions in. The libraries see that dimension. It's just they get so much stuff from us programmers that we just have programmed, and they're all like, great. And you know, some of it's really good. Sometimes they can't tell it's programming, but still, there's just this, I don't know how to describe it. And I know this is a hard sell to programmers out there saying, I can't afford to hire people. Well, you're probably going to have to figure out a way if you want to get into the bigger sides of library. If you're not a player, and I'm only a keyboard player, so I'm not a guitar player, I'm not a physical drummer or physical bass player or physical guitar player. So that means I have to either really come up with great stuff or send it to Stevie or hire somebody in Nashville to really play if I want real guitar that's played by an actual human being live for that particular song only, not just like a sample that they play and I just use on a bunch of stuff. And so it's just a hard thing to convince people to do, but it's been the music business for 70 years. That's what people have been doing, to record stuff in the bigger studios in Nashville, Los Angeles, New York,
Mhm.
Austin, Atlanta. There's real people in real studios working, and not just one guy at a keyboard.
Yeah, well, I think you don't necessarily have to break the bank to get people to play on your tracks. You could speak a little bit probably on I'm sure there's some variance to some of the deals that you make with the folks that collaborate with you. But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that the majority of listeners probably have someone in their life who's either an instrumentalist or a half decent singer that they could work out some deal with that doesn't involve like money up front, but rather is some kind of deal on the back end. That's an option too, right?
Yeah.
Going to sites like soundbetter.com and stuff, it's going to be expensive. You're dealing with like professionals who do this all the
Maybe.
time, and they're going to be able to crank it out quite fast, and there's value to that. But yeah, I'm sure that the majority of listeners out there probably have someone in their life who could has a half decent voice. And the funny thing about vocals, and Jesse did a great video on this the other day on his channel, where he was talking about how like some of these the trends towards like vocal centric tracks is kind of a thing now with licensing. And it's funny because I noticed this as well, and I've been trying to incorporate vocal elements into all the tracks that I'm doing for Artlist, whether it's just kind of messing around with samples or recording my own vocals or recording my friend Missy, who's a great singer. It's funny because and this kind of depends on the genre somewhat, but I was working on some like trip hop for them late last year. And I wrote, like, they wanted vocals like for this one particular track, and I wrote all the lyrics out, and I like made it took me a while. It was a lot of hard work. I brought my friend Missy in, and we recorded like two separate verses and like a chorus, and it was it was a heavy load. And then, like the feedback I got back from Artlist on my first round of feedback was like, hey, like, you got to trim all these vocals. Like, we just need like a catchy hook. And
Yeah.
it's really funny because Jesse made the same point on his video, and it's like, you don't have to write like a novel in terms of lyrics. You kind of just have to write like a catchy hook is all you need in a lot of cases, especially with like hip hop and stuff like that. Maybe in a more traditional singer-songwriter context, like a verse chorus kind of thing would work, and that's totally fine. But all this is just to say that, like, I don't, you don't need to make a huge production of it, but just like it's actually quite easy to just kind of like write like a little vocal hook that could be, that you could place on the chorus of your track.
Even if you don't hire 5 musicians to play, and you play everything else, you program everything else, or you play everything else maybe, but you send it to one person that does something that you don't do. Like Steve and I keep threatening him that I'm going to have him collaborate with me on a few songs. And
I'm ready.
Get a second, I'm going to send these songs over to him. Um, but that all. What I mainly need on those is what I don't do or can't do, which is actual guitar playing,
Right.
and maybe bass playing, depending on this one song,
Right.
and maybe some loops or something that he might think of that I haven't thought of, but not a lot. Not like he has to redo the whole thing for me, but I just need him to fix up a few parts and maybe add some more convincing guitar parts to the thing I've got going on. And then the other thing I want to say is that it's not as expensive as you think. You might be thinking, oh, to get a Nashville or LA type play, I'm going to have to pay $500 or $1,000 or something. And guess what? That's been true. I've had people charge $1,500.
Right.
Really superstar players in the jazz or pop industry from LA charge $1,500 per person to play on this one guy's album years ago. But usually in Nashville, I can get musicians from anywhere from $100 to $200, and they are every bit the stars that the LA guys were.
Right.
And you can go to Sound Better and find that kind of deal too for great players who will give you 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 options and different instruments and all this kind of stuff. Vocalists, with vocalists, it's a little different because if they're featured, you're going to have to hire them on a work for hire basis. And that's
Yes.
going to be a little bit more expensive because they are getting hired once and then you can use it anywhere you want, Spotify, licensing, and you get all the money because you've hired them work for hire.
You're buying the rights to the track.
The players know that too. And there's probably something understood with players that if it becomes a major hit, that there's probably some extra payments that we talk about in Nashville, but that's a deeper subject. But for the most part, for what you're going to do, you can hire people on a work for hire basis, and it's not going to break the bank. It's not going to be that expensive. You partner with somebody. I have clients that partner with me all the time to put these out because unlike just putting these out and hope you sell on CDs or hope you sell downloads, there is a possible back end that's way beyond just sales of licensing that could last for years or decades. So the investment is a good one especially if it helps you get into the library. And to be honest, that's what helped me get into my first library was those songs produced with great players in Nashville. There wasn't a ton of MIDI on that first one, or if there was, it was hired players that I did or players plus MIDI, but it's mostly the great singers or the great players that I used on those to get that first deal.
Yeah, and I mean, like vocal stuff aside, we're not trying to make the case that like you have to have human players on all your tracks. Like you can. I've made some really successful tracks for both Motion Array and Artlist that were totally all just like sample based and MIDI. But I think that I think it's worth noting that any way you can sort of capture some humanity in it is really really going to be useful. I mean, just like a tiny example would just be like if I'm playing keys, for example. Like I'm the kind of because I'm not a pianist, I'm like programming in the MIDI and I'm like copy pasting these patterns and like making alterations to every bar to try to like add some variance to it and everything like that. Like that's how that's like my life when it comes to trying to record piano. But then I humanize it. And I tried to make it sound as like I actually performed it, and that takes a lot of effort. And I think it's really really subtle, but it's the kind of thing that people on the other end, like who are receiving your tracks for an application, they're going to notice. If you're just sending if you just whip together a track using like arcade or like splice loops, and there was no effort put into kind of make it. Put your unique stamp on it in some kind of way or capture some kind of like human element to it, then it just you can hear that and I think that there's a direct correlation for me between like the effort I put in, even if it's just a completely sample based track, like a hip-hop song for example is like this largely just me chopping up samples, but that takes time. It's not something I can whip together in like in half an hour. It takes like usually like a day or two to like finish a track, and then and it's a lot of it's time consuming, you know. So I think that there's a correlation between the effort that you put in. It doesn't necessarily have to be me playing the bass or me, you know, doing vocals on the track, but I'm doing my best to capture something unique and to put my own like particular stamp on something.
I just talked to a client yesterday who was mad at you
Oh yeah, why?
because you just come up with tracks so easily. Now you don't. What you just said was what you really do, which is what nobody sees is the editing. Even when you do videos
Yes,
where you show what you did and you show your track production, they're not seeing the hour that you put in chopping that track up and editing and everything. You kind of zoom over that part to show how you're doing it. I don't think people understand the amount of time that we take with productions. We may say we did it in 4 or 5 hours or something like that, but what that means is it might have taken, actually, for me sometimes that could mean 4 or 5 weeks, because I may not have gotten back to that song the next day because of other jobs or things I was working on. And sometimes I like to leave time between so I can go back to a song and go, is that really sounding good? I need fresh ears, so let me wait a few days and I'll go back to that song. And I think we've got so many people just getting scalar or getting any of these MIDI loops, and they're just throwing the MIDI loop in without making any changes, no velocity changes, no chord changes. And I that's why I quit using Arcade. I loved the loops and everything that it had. I was depending on them, and they were also starting to pop up and maybe cause people not to download the tracks because they thought they were samples. And that's a big deal with libraries and with stuff. If you are, I had a student come to me. I probably told this story already, where he used a Logic sample and just pulled it over, and that was the main meat of the whole recording. And SoundCloud denied him
right,
to put him on SoundCloud because someone had already used that same sample and put it up there first. Now they weren't the maker of that sample, but they were the first to use that sample, and then the SoundCloud engine heard it. YouTube would do the same thing. So you've got to just be super careful with samples, and you got to put some work into editing. And I just don't think I think most people look at what we do and think, oh, that's easy. They're just throwing tracks up, and then they're just getting tracks from here. And now we've got AI tools coming out like Scalar and stuff that say, oh, you can, if you played this chord, you can play these chords, and then you just drag those chords over, and you go, okay, I'm good. I got chords. But that's not the way the sausage is made.
that's right. That's right. And you know, some of this, it's like kind of my fault, because like I'm just thinking back to like the video I did about Arcade, like, you know, 2 years ago or something, where it's like, check how fast this came together. You know, it's like kind of like it provides some kind of entertainment value to kind of sell it as like this really easy thing. And like I realize that like I'm kind of you know, betraying the real process in when I make those kinds of statements, because it really is like, you know, I love Arcade, like I still use it, but I use it in a very particular way. Like I'll like print stuff down to audio and then mess with it further, and you know, and it's like I think that that's the best way to use Arcade. It's like if you're just if it feels too easy, then it's going to sound like it was too easy for the most part. I think that that's the case, and I think that, you know, people who listen to applications all day, like, you know, the dude I was speaking to from Motion Array, I mean, he's going to notice, like he's going to hear the difference between someone who put in like 8+ hours on a track and the person who just threw together some loops.
Yeah,
So
the people
you know,
that put together amazing tracks in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, they may exist on the earth, but if they're one in 1,000 or 1,000,000. I mean, it's not everybody is able to create tracks that quickly with that much quality. And so if you watch Stevie B tutorials or whoever's tutorials and you see them making this great track, it didn't take the time they're showing you. It took probably hours of their time. And even if they said it didn't, who remembers? I never remember how much time I put into a piece. People always ask me, how much time does this take? And you're like, I don't remember. I mean, I'm not in a race. Not a
it's
a
not a
lot
race.
of, a lot of times I have to tell my students, do not, this isn't a race.
It's not
Take
a race.
your
Yeah.
time, make something good, and use program carefully, and change your chords up, change your beats up, change things from section to section. Quit just copying and pasting and copying and pasting. It's fine to, and they're learning, so I allow them to do that at first. But as we move on into more music theory things, I have them add and learn to grow the tracks and grow the sections and all that kind of stuff. And all that just takes time and thought.
Yeah, you know what takes time is because like the main that usually the like the basic idea, like the maybe the motif or like the hook or something like that, that usually comes together very quickly for me. Like I'll hear it, I'll be like, done. That's the magic. But the time spent is all of the like just finessing the details and like getting the arrangement right and like coming up with all the stops and all the interesting things along the way to make it like this, you know, this whole journey. That's the stuff that takes time. But usually like the ideas for my tracks are very simple and they come together very quickly. So hopefully that's something that I could kind of convey in future like production videos, rather than, you know, trying to make it seem as though I came up with a full track in like 5 minutes, which is never the case. But like sometimes a good idea comes together in 5 minutes, sometimes.
And I want to say this, and this is something we came up with yesterday, and it's not that I've never come up with this before, but sometimes you are just not going to be the person who can do that song or all of the parts of that song. You
Yeah.
might be able to fake it a little bit, but eventually and some artists just aren't the artists who produce their own music. I know that sounds weird, and some people listen to that say, I'm never going to be that. I have to do the production because I can't afford any other way.
Hmm.
Well, you may not find luck with your particular production style getting into all these places that other people are getting into just because you're not able to produce that way. Like I have clients and I have issues where I am not the person to do this programming. I need to have a live band cut it. It has to be cut by a live band to sound real.
Yeah.
Or I need to program it and then have band replay it and then I'll reprogram again. And um, I'm just telling you that there are clients that are going to have a type of sound that is not working for the genre that they want to create. Let's say you want to create corporate or you want to create current sounding pop music and you just don't sound current or pop. And that's just the way it can be. And that's okay. You have to accept that and say, listen, I'm fine to go out and find a producer to work with or partners to work with that are going to help me get this thing. And you have to be okay with that because you are not the end all be all of the world in music, and you might need help. If those of us who are pros, and I like to think of myself as a professional in this business, readily admit that I have to have band people play on things in order to get me in libraries a lot of times. Even on this percussion record, even though I programmed a lot, there was 4 songs that were totally played and sometimes mostly written by professional drummers in Nashville. So I'm using them as much as I can. I'm using them. Now we are partnering on things. That's another way to get people in your area or professionals you know and say, listen, I'm going to go after this library music and really pursue this full time. I'd love for you to partner with me on these and we'll split the writers share 50-50 and we'll split any sync fees 50-50 and you sign the contracts together and everything. That's what I'm doing with these drummers. And you know, it's a risk for both of us. I mean, we got to spend the time to create that music, but it's also a benefit to both of us if it takes off. And so you can
Yeah.
think of things that way. It's not just about money. Sometimes you can work out deals with your musical partners and do things, but I'm telling you, it's going to provide a different dimension to what you are presenting to these libraries and to these people who are listening.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, library music aside, like, you know, it just something that I was thinking of is like, you know, I mean, I can't do it all. I want to be able to do it all. I mean, and you could try, but
Well, we buy all the libraries and stuff. We want to be able to do it all.
yeah, exactly, right. But I mean, yeah, you're going to find a lot of magic when you collaborate with people. We've said this so many times on previous episodes, but there's magic that happens when you collaborate with other
And
folks
it's a
who
hard
know
sell.
it better than you. And I mean, it's like, for example, like I could mix my own band's records if I wanted to. But I outsource that to someone who just has more experience with mixing, like, you know, like band records with, and I mean, it's like it just something different and magical happens when, because I mean, like in those cases, I have a little bit of budget to hire like a professional mix engineer, someone who I know and trust, and man, those records, they just sound so much better than I could do with it. I mean, it would be something. It would be one thing if I could do it, but like I love outsourcing that particular project because This guy Jesse, who mixes our records, he's just so damn good at it. And it's like, if you have the budget for it, man, get someone who really knows what they're doing. And then of course, like I sit in the studio with him and I poach all of his ideas too. So
Well, I could say the same thing about hiring musicians as hiring engineers and hiring mixing people. The problem is once you get deep into licensing, it's not about the money, it's more about the time because you're just trying to crank out and then the
yeah,
libraries come back to you saying fix this. Or in my case, the main library I work with, I just give them Logic files and they do the mixing. They want the files there so that they can do the main mixes, and I don't have to do them anymore, and I don't have to hire an engineer because the library wants to do it. That may just be the case with this one library, and it works out for me because they use Logic and I use Logic, so it's an easy send to them without having to do stems and all that kind of stuff because they basically have everything. But
yeah,
before I was doing that, before he told me that, hey, send me the Logic files, I'll mix it here. I was having it mixed professionally, and he loved those mixes. Those mixes were great, but it was that if he ever needed changes down the line, I had to go back to my mixing engineer. He had to call it up from backups. It could be a year or 2 years old. There
yeah,
was a time that it took for me to get those mixes back from my engineer, back to me, back to the library. And so, um, and that's why you do stems. But if there's ever a problem, you have to go back through that whole party. But if you're, again, when you're first starting, you're trying to get that really super incredible top quality mix to show to those labels. Guess what? Those weren't my mixes, any of them that I got signed the first time. I had them mixed by a Grammy winning engineer in Nashville, and we paid him for it, or he was partnered on it or whatever. But I'm telling you, it's dimensional, and it's using different people as part of your crew and team, and it's very, very important, I think.
Well, I think that's a great place to end this discussion because I think that the what we're trying to say here is is capturing dimensionality in your music, whether that be through hiring somebody who can do a better job at playing guitar or bass or drums or whatever than you can, or just capturing some realness to your productions. I think that it is where things are going. And beyond that, if you're working with samples, if you're working with loops, you got to finesse those things, man. You got to put some time into to being creative with them, and that's the only way to really stand out. Because when thousands and thousands upon thousands of other music producers are using the same tools, it's like you're going to have these applications being reviewed on the other side, whether if you're a library or even if you're like a music label, you're going to get these submissions all the time, and you're going to be able to tell, these people can tell. They're like, oh yeah, that's from Splice, that's from Arcade, or I've heard that before. It's like, what value are you adding to your music? And that comes from many different approaches, but I think we touched on them in this episode, and adding some humanity to them, adding your own unique voice and your own unique playing. That's going to go a long way in this business. And
remember, you can pay for it, or you can partner up
yep.
to do it. And there's lots of ways that don't just mean you have to pay out of pocket. You can get partners that are going to pay for it because they want to be involved in the process because they think it's cool, and they think it's cool that the music might be in a TV show down the line, and they'll be part of it. So there's a lot of ways to find partners and people to partner up with rather than just spending your own money out of your pocket.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, excellent, cool. We'll take this, and I hope you take it out there and take this to heart, because we're not saying you're not good enough, but we're just saying we're not good enough. We all the time have to do these things as well, and so we're not preaching anything other than we're practicing what we preach, and we're preaching what we're practicing, I should say.
I think we're preaching quality. We're preaching quality over convenience and time and effort, and those are things that I'm always going to come back to. Those are just fundamental concepts for success, I think. Let me know what you guys are thinking in the comments, and
make sure you watch the Motion Array video on this same channel, on Steve's channel, because it's going to let you know from the horse's mouth what even companies like Motion Array, which a lot of people would just call a stock music licensing company or licensing place, but even they are looking for artists and this dimensionality that we're talking about and this quality.
Yeah, and remember that they're like part of Artlist. So you can, you can apply the same things that they're saying to the art list as well. I mean, they're looking, yeah, like you said before we press record here. It's like Alone from the audio team. He kept using the term artist. That's a key point. He's saying artist, not.
And when you use another singer or you use another player, you're getting more artists involved in the process.
Yeah.
And so you're getting their artistic ability in there. So you're not just having your artistic ability, but other people's, and that only magnifies and multiplies the possibility of quality and success.
Yeah, that's right. Cool.
All right. So fake ending number 3.
Psych.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
See you soon. See you next week.
Bye. It's really over.
It's really over now. Okay. All right.
Play the music.